the fool's limit. If the earth could talk, I wonder what it would say. Would it sound tired, overworked, maybe a little resentful? I imagine it would sigh and say in the exasperated tone of a single mom who's at her wit's end, I gave you everything. Water, land, food, air, a home, the ability to sustain yourselves in abundance. And in return, all you've ever done is ask for more. And do I ever get a call? A thank you card? No, you just eat all my food and leave a mess. But the thing about single moms and planets is they both have a breaking point. With moms and others who are nearing their capacity to cope with everything life is throwing at them, it's called burnout. For the Earth, scientists call its breaking point the carrying capacity, the maximum strain an environment can handle before it starts to fail. And like with moms and planets, if we keep asking for more, eventually there will be nothing left to give. For years, scientists have debated the Earth's true carrying capacity. Some studies suggest a sustainable limit of around 4 billion people. Others estimate 8 billion people. On November 15th, 2022, Earth's population hit 8 billion people. Now, if the higher estimates are right, we're on the edge of our planet's carrying capacity. If the lower estimates are right, well, we blew past our limit decades ago. And we're not just maxing out our population limits, we're devouring resources faster than the planet can replenish them. Right now, humanity is consuming resources at a rate that would require 1.7 Earths to sustain. We're taking nearly twice as much as the planet can give back. There's a thing called Earth Overshoot Day. That's the day when we exceed the planet's annual budget. It fell on August 1st last year. That means for 5 months of the year, we're basically living on borrowed time. But here's the problem. There's no second Earth to borrow from. Either way, whether you're talking about population or resource consumption, we're running out of runway. Or maybe we already ran out. Maybe we passed the safe takeoff point years ago, but no one noticed because we were too busy over who gets to sit in first class or whether 14B should be able to recline their seat. And now we're at the point of no return. We're in free fall. And the only question left is, do we pull up or brace for impact? The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Shakespeare wrote those words over 400 years ago, but they feel more relevant now than ever. We often look to the heavens for signs of our fate, blaming the economy, the government, technology, or forces beyond our control. But the real crisis isn't written in the stars. It's written in our choices. Because the greater threat we face isn't just environmental collapse. It's the erosion of civility, reason, and the very structures that hold society together. We're not being undone by fate. We're being undone by ourselves. Societies don't just collapse because of war, economic failure, or natural disaster. History tells us something different. More often than not, civilizations collapse from within. Not because they lacked resources, but because they lacked the wisdom to manage them. Not because of external threats, but because of internal failures. Failures of leadership, failures of foresight, failures of collective intelligence. If you think I'm being hyperbolic, consider these facts. Mental health disorders have skyrocketed. In 2019, nearly 1 billion people worldwide were living with a mental disorder. That was pre-COVID. After COVID-19, anxiety surged by 26%, depression by 28%. Political violence is rising. Since January 6, 2021, there have been over 213 documented acts of political violence in the United States alone, the highest sustained increase since the 1970s. Economic despair fuels extremism. A global survey found that 60% of people feel left behind, and many now believe violence is necessary to create change. With the cost of living going up for so many, and for others the chance of living going down, I'm reminded of something Dr. King said years ago, and I'm paraphrasing here. Violence is the language of the unheard. Understand, this isn't just a political, economic, or climate issue, although we are all affected by politics, economics, and climate. This issue is an existential one. Society, like the earth, has a carrying capacity for dysfunction. We can only carry so much division, short-sightedness, and destruction before the entire system begins to break under the weight of its own instability. Historically, it's been suggested that empires have a lifespan of around 250 years. If that's true, then the United States, at 249 years old, is standing at that threshold. Some empires like Rome and the Ottomans lasted far beyond the 250-year mark, but others, like the Akkadian Empire, 180 years, the Neo-Babylonians, 87 years, or the Aztecs, 196 years, collapsed far sooner. So, what determines whether a civilization thrives or crumbles? It's not just external forces. It's internal choices. And if history tells us anything, it's that no empire lasts forever. And here's the thing. Collapse isn't a cliff that we suddenly fall over. It's a threshold that we slowly build towards. And every civilization has one. I call it the fool's limit. It's the point where bad decisions, short-term thinking, and self-sabotage pile up so high that the weight of our own dysfunction breaks the system. The Romans hit the fool's limit when their leaders ignored corruption and decadence, and the empire rotted from inside. The Mayans hit the fool's limit when they overexploited their environment and ignored the warning signs. And now, we are pushing dangerously close to our own. And the most dangerous part, when you're past the fool's limit, you don't realize it until it's too late. You see, our Congress can extend the debt limit to borrow more money to pay for programs, but can we as a society extend the fool's limit to continue borrowing from our future to pay for the folly of today? There is one thing that guarantees a civilization's downfall more than any other factor, and economist Carlo Cipolla had a name for it: stupidity. Cipolla defines stupidity not just as ignorance, but as consistent behavior that harms oneself and others with no benefit to anyone. Think about that. Stupidity is not just being uninformed, it's making decisions that make life worse, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. It's ignoring warning signs. It's doubling down on bad choices. It's refusing to course correct even when the evidence is overwhelming. It's voting against your own interests or the rights and well-being of others. It's prioritizing personal gain over collective survival. Does any of that sound familiar? We see it all the time in politics, business, leadership, everyday decisions. We know what's destroying us, yet we continue to do it. We have created systems that reward greed and short-term thinking and division. We are pushing past our fool's limit, fueled by Cipolla's definition of stupidity. But stupidity is not inevitable. Every civilization has a fool's limit, but not every civilization crosses it. So, how do we pull up before we hit the ground? 3 suggestions. Number 1, we have to stop rewarding stupidity. That means calling out destructive behavior, bad leadership, and short-sighted decision-making. 2, we have to choose long-term wisdom over short-term gratification. That means thinking beyond ourselves, acting for the greater good, not just personal gain. 3, we have to stop pretending we're helpless. Every great shift in history began when enough people refused to accept dysfunction as normal. I know. You're under a lot. You may be at your wit's end, your breaking point right now. You may not have the capacity to act up, speak up, or step up. You may not feel like you can change the course of society or the world by yourself. Well, the good news is you don't have to. But you can make a difference. You can start small. You can start with your next thought by questioning assumptions instead of accepting them. You can start with your next conversation by listening with curiosity instead of judgment. You can start with your next choice by choosing integrity over convenience, wisdom over impulse, action over apathy. You can read something that challenges your perspective. You can support a cause that matters to you and benefits humanity. Or you can start by helping someone who needs it without expecting anything in return. Because small actions multiplied become movements. But make no mistake, this is a moment that demands leadership. Not titles, not positions, but people willing to rise, to think, and to act better, smarter. And what the world is calling us to do is meet this moment. We are still in control of our trajectory, but we have to act. Because right now, we're at a crossroads, but crossroads are moments of possibility, not only despair. We can continue past the fool's limit, fueled by ignorance and self-destruction and stupidity. Or we can choose intelligence, wisdom, and a future that doesn't end in collapse. The earth is tired. It has little left to give. Civilization is straining under the weight of fear and uncertainty, cowering in the shadow of a doubtful future. We are on the brink. So, do we pull up? Course correct? Or do we stay the course and brace for impact? You see, history doesn't care about excuses. It only remembers the civilizations that fell and the ones that fought to survive. It was Charles Darwin who said, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change." It has never been survival of the fittest. It has always been survival of the most adaptable. The planet is screaming at us to adapt. The poor, the downtrodden, the exploited are screaming at us to adapt. They're not asking us for more. They're asking us for better, smarter, kinder. And if we ignore them, we're ignoring the same warnings that echoed through Rome before it collapsed. The same warnings the Mayans ignored as they drained their resources dry. But history isn't just a record of collapse. It's also a record of resilience. Societies have faced breaking points before, but those that survived did so because enough people chose to act. The page of history is turning. The world is watching, waiting to see what we will do. The question isn't whether collapse is possible. The question is whether we will write a different ending.